Hi, Filmatics. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today we have a very special guest. We have Daniel Stern. He's a comedian, actor, screenwriter, and the founder of PodFest Berlin. Ooh, we got to ask him about that. So let's welcome the show. Hi, Daniel.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
It's really great to have you here. So where are you at recording with me today?
Right now, I'm in my parents' living room. Not because all my dreams have failed, but just because I'm visiting them. We have a new baby to show off. I live in Berlin, Germany, and so now we every once a year or less, if there's a pandemic going on, we hit the West Coast to see my partner's family. East Coast for mine, and then we try and shove in a wedding or a bar mitzvah or whatever else we can manage to do while we're still here.
Ah, that's so beautiful. So you said you were in I'm sorry, you were not Boston, but you were
Uh,
in
Western Massachusetts. It's in Northampton. It's if you've ever heard of it, it's the home of Smith College and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So
Oh, how fun. So congratulations on
yeah,
your baby, your first baby.
thank you. Second now.
Oh, okay. You gonna
Yeah.
they should how old are they?
The older is 5. The younger is 4 months. So yeah, we
Oh.
took our time in between, and it was sort of the second one's like a lockdown hobby. Some people do sourdoughs and things. We were like, oh, let's make a person.
Well, maybe your kids can listen to Enchanting Book Readings podcast because
Absolutely.
yeah, there's lots of kid stories, and it's ranked 1% globally. So people in Berlin like it, and and all around the world. So hopefully they like it. But so let's talk about you and all these fabulous things you're doing. And so I want to ask you. So you're from the United States, and
Mhm.
now you're in Berlin. You were a former talk show host, a retired competitive eater. We got to talk about that. Screenwriter, actor, and stand-up comedian. So I want to
Yeah.
ask you first, so when you're a little kid, what was some of your favorite films growing up?
I mean, I was born in 1980, so like the films that defined childhood were, of course, like the Lucas and Spielberg, Memento. It was. I'll never forget the first time I had Star Wars. When I first time I saw Star Wars, my older cousins pulled me aside. They're like, "You haven't seen this movie," and just the fact that they're talking to me is already super exciting. We were in Detroit visiting family, and I'm like, I no, I've never seen it. They're like, well, we go, we ask my parents, is he allowed to watch it? They say sure. They put in the VHS tape. Then someone handed me a package of Starburst candies. Okay, I grew up in a very tofu household, so now all of a sudden I've got this sugar rush and this Star Wars rush, and I don't know what year that was. I don't know how old it is, but it's like if it's not my first memory, it's my third. So that was it, and then of course, the Indiana Jones and all of those things. Um, and then I think the first sort of let's call it artsy film that ever really spoke to me was Time Bandits. Like a really incredible, like Terry Gilliam, children's movie that just terrified and excited me. And then I'd say the other really memorable film of my childhood that I would watch again and again was Tron, which just the fantasy and the science fiction of that, like that's again. And I'd say there's of the movies I loved as a child, I'll watch any of them right now. They're movies that hold up or that I find new things in.
Yeah, yeah, they were the best, like Gremlins and Goonies, and it's so funny you had Starburst watching Star Wars. I love that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
a star-studded evening at my in my cousin's living room.
Back in the day when they had
Oh,
VHS tapes, I don't even know if our audience knows what VHS tapes are, but they were like
oh my
literally little
god.
tapes that like you pushed into your TV had like a little attachment where you put these tapes, and then they had like the discs, the DVDs, and now everything's streaming from your computer, and it's just amazing how fast that went, right? Like the
Yes.
technology just zoomed through.
It's fun to still once in a while hold actual physical media in your hand because those things were treasures. Like there's a shelf in my parents' house still where I have my old VHS tapes, and I'm like, no, you can't get rid of them. Yes, they are useless. No, they do not look better than what I can stream. They don't sound better, but like, there's a box art and there's just I remember the feeling of holding it and you can't really replace that even though you can upgrade every single aspect of the experience now.
Yeah. So that's wonderful. So and then so you're growing up, you said you grew up where did you grow up then?
I grew up in North. I was born in Detroit, Michigan, and then
Okay.
I grew up in Northampton, Massachusetts. Um, my dad sort of found this town. He left in like the Volkswagen van, pulled into gas up, and the guy at the station said, "Yep, it's a good place to raise a family." So he like got on a payphone. You can explain that to your audience as well, and said, "All right, this is where we're living." And that's how we ended up in Western Massachusetts, and it was a great place to grow up. I mean, it was a town that, had gone through being, a mill town and whatever. It has a history, Sylvester Graham, the inventor of the graham cracker, lived here. And, my kindergarten was the first free kindergarten in America, I think. And, there's like that history of, post colonial America or colonial America. And, but then it went through enough downtimes that it could be taken over by artists and hippies and, it was the place where they invented the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So,
Oh my
that's
gosh. And a graham
that's a
cracker.
landmark.
That's
Yeah.
I mean, I love s'mores, so thank you for inventing that, right? I think every fire either has marshmallows or some more attempt.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a tricky thing. Either you're too young to keep them from burning, or eventually you're just too drunk. So there's a small window where you can make a decent s'more.
Yeah. Sometimes like your marshmallow just catches on fire and it's all scalded. You're like, no, but then you're like, hey, if I take the crust off that's scalded, it's all gooey in the middle. So you kind of learn like the tricks, right?
Exactly. That is if you don't mind the waste of that, or you have like a weird friend who will eat it, or an uncle, like that's not wasteful. But yeah, that gooey one when you've just caught fire is kind of the best.
Yeah, and, thank goodness they invented that graham cracker. So I'm gonna ask you, so, did you have a favorite director that you were thinking about or actor? Because or you liked you went to be a comedian, so
Yeah.
how did you learn about comedy or comedians?
Yeah. I mean, so again, early memories of watching stand up. So again, I don't know, it's like the old technology hour with Daniel Stern, but we had this box on top of the TV and there was 15 buttons that went across the top of it to select the channel. And then there was a toggle on the right side where you had up, middle, and down. So you could
Yeah.
have 1 through 15, 16 through 30, and then 31 through 45. And I remember being young enough that I couldn't remember the numbers, but I remember there being this sort of channel in the middle on the right side where you could find stand-up comedy. And this was before Comedy Central. It was some regional channel like the Comedy Channel or had some name like that. And they would just kind of play these videos of like Dom Herrera hosting at Caroline's and people would come up or local stuff. And there was just bits I would just take and run around the house doing. And my parents, I remember some of them and like they're completely inappropriate to be coming out of the, it's like, it's like there's jokes that don't hold up now that's, no longer the 80s. And there's jokes that definitely weren't appropriate for a child to say. So, and then I kind of lost track of stand up for a while until I moved to Berlin. And part of my entry was through the like R-rated films of like the 2000s and that sort of comeback. And then I was isolated in the new city, not knowing anyone, not having any friends. And then I would sort of type in actors' names into iTunes. And then I kind of discovered podcasting and rediscovered stand up, I think through that world. And that sort of became what I did in that city. And like in a city where you had the opportunity to just pursue the arts unfettered and encouraged.
Well,
That was sort of like my journey back to it.
yeah, well, how'd you get to Berlin? Like you're in Massachusetts, you're a
Yep.
little kid, like barely able to touch the buttons, and then so did your
Yeah.
family move there, or you went to college, or?
No, I ended up in Berlin. I'd been living in Portland, Oregon. I got married. The woman I married got a job in Berlin, postdoctoral research. And the idea was, oh, we'll go there for like a year or two. and then it's like 6 more months, 6 more, okay, one, okay, 2 more, and then it's sort of like, now you're like, oh my God, over a decade went by. Like, what, what is going on here? This is where I live. This is like, I don't know how to live anywhere else at this point. And that was a turned out to be a wonderful journey for me. I kind of went there kicking and screaming because I loved Portland. Um, but now I'll be kicking and screaming when we move wherever we move next.
Oh wow. And then so you and how did your Podfest Berlin come about? Like, do you want to share with us a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, it's an origin story. I think a lot of people found things along the same lines that I do, where I kept saying to people, "Someone should do this. Someone should do this. Why doesn't anyone do this?" And it just kept not happening. And then I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna be the one. I actually have to do it." And so the first year, I found a date, I found a venue, and I just put it together myself in 5, 6 weeks. From the website, I was writing legal documents, for contracts with sponsors. I was putting the whole thing together, and it just worked, and people just got excited. You just take like podcast festival Berlin, and you stick those words together, and people are like, "Yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it." And I don't think I've ever gotten as much attention off of just the words alone of a thing I had created. It's like, what's the log line? I don't need a log line. I don't. It's all right there. So it was really fun and really successful, and just something that just keeps growing and people get excited about. And it was also partially like the pandemic. Podcasting was the one thing that could grow, that everyone could start and keep going during it. But we never had a physical space, and I had friends with podcasts, and we didn't talk about that with each other. Or it was sort of because it was their side hustle, or it was just maybe it was something they didn't need to share. And so then getting everyone physically together. And one of the things I focus on is like live audience recordings, because you have this thing like podcasting, you're so intimate with your audience, and it's so one way. You might get a like or a review or something, but to actually come into a room and see all these people that feel like they love you and know you already, and to watch a podcaster who had never done a live recording do that, was one of the best things about the festival. Like, they walk in and they're like, "Oh my gosh, like, these people exist. It's not just a void." So that's like something that I really focus on. I think a lot of festivals are kind of about the business of podcasting, and I'm like, it's kind of more about the podcasters and the audience for me.
Oh, wow, that would be really incredible to, like, connect with your audience, because because I've been doing my kids' podcast, this is my 3rd year, and every week when you see that number 1 in different countries, you just
Yeah.
like, you didn't, because I have to write these stories. They've never seen them in a book. These are brand new, and there's no advertising, no budget, and the fact that they love them, it just touches your heart. So I work so hard to give the kids a new story or a dance or meditation, and to just to connect with like the kids, because now people are like, oh, I told my babysitter and they listen to it, they love it. So but to actually meet the audience, that must be a beautiful, beautiful experience.
It's really incredible and like really rewarding. I mean, as much as I love podcasting, I also like people. And like, and that's really, you just don't necessarily get that until you really have found a place to to join with them, and like let them, see how it works, and get behind the wheel with you a little bit, if you do a little Q&A, or find some other way to, like, even just for them to be able to clap and cheer for, like, hear a stinger play live that they've heard like 100 times, is, I think, really fun. And yeah, I started doing my podcast live because I was the comic relief, and I was dealing with these hosts, my co-hosts who I love, but they were trying not to ruin the audio by laughing. Like, they're like leaning away from the mic. I'm like, let's get an audience in here. You guys are killing me right now. So, and that's just, that's been really, really special. And one thing that's interesting in Germany with children's like audio is there's this tradition of the Hörspiel, which is like kind of like radio plays, still exists there. And so every kid kind of grows up not listening to not just books on tape, but like, there's actors' voices and sound effects and music. And it's a really rich like audio tradition there that I would love to see grow into podcasting and vice versa, because I love like radio is so fun to do. There's no limits, you know. You don't have to build a set if you want to be on a spaceship. You're just like, hey, we're on the spaceship, bleep bloop, you know, and it's like one of my favorite things to write for.
Yeah,
I mean, you understand.
I would love a budget for like the editor and to add the sound effects, you know, because then you
Right.
can do those sci-fi and you have like all that sound effects. So that's yeah, you know, but when talking, so I want to ask you, so when you're there, oh yeah, speaking of your favorite singer and singing on there, you have a film called Universal Lullaby. You're currently developing with funding
Yeah.
from Median Board Berlin Brandenburg. So do you want to tell us a little bit about
Yep.
that and maybe give us a little lullaby?
Yeah. That's a project I started with actor, writer, producer, director named Timo Jacobs. You know, he was someone I met. He was going to be in a short film I wrote, and I think that's how we first met. And then later, his last film was about stand-up comedy, and so I worked with him to develop sort of his, you know, his onstage work, and sort of as a stand-up comedy for film consultant, unofficially. So that was how we started working together. And then over the last year or so, we've just, you know, had our cafe meetings, and he's just like an unlimited well of ideas. Like just the most. It's really fun to work with someone where you know you'll never have to be inspired. Like he'll just come in inspired by everything, and then you know we try. I punched into one story after another, and it's never quite. We didn't quite get it, and then I was at this musical performance. It was actually part of a release party for a new podcast, and it was something that I had gotten to because of the festival. There was a series of musicians playing there, and it was amazing. Everyone really talented. And then this woman got on stage, and halfway through her first song, I was like, I think I need to go home and write now, because this whole film just like exploded into my brain. You know, partially from the song she was playing, and partially from all these bits and pieces that we'd been knocking back and forth for the last year, and it just came together in that moment. And I was like, I need to write it now. I don't want to get out my phone and start like jotting notes, because this is like this intimate performance. And I almost went home. I was like, no, Dan, if halfway through her first song is this inspiring, let's see what you get by the end. And so that night, you know, I said hi to her, and then I didn't want to bother her, and I went home, wrote everything together, like put it on paper, and then eventually through connections got to go back to that artist and be like, hey, you know, this song is really not pivotal to the story. It inspired it. I'm not, you know, but like let's connect. Let me tell you what I wrote. And like that was sort of the first person I pitched it to, and she dug it, and that was really validating. And now we've got his Timo Jacobs Productions funding from like the regional film commission, and so we get to kind of start moving forward with that. And I don't think I've ever been so excited about anything I've written, but that's literally everything that I've most recently written. So I'm a bit of I like what's new.
And what genre is that going to be?
It's like it's a dark drama, and it's infused with a lot of music to carry it through. It's not a musical, you know. The music's you know, diegetic and non-diegetic, but not it's no one's seeing what they're thinking, and it just deals with a lot with her relationships to her family and her work and the world around her, and has a strong through line for both that main character, her younger sister who she takes under her wing, and then her father who did a lot of damage and is trying to do the best he can with what he's got left of his family.
Wow, that sounds incredible. And so do you want to talk a little bit about like your comedy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stand up was kind of my reintroduction to being an artist after years of kind of being behind the bar, managing restaurants, doing all of these other things, which I loved at the time, but ultimately like was probably not who I was supposed to be. And the fact, I think what really was intoxicating about stand up was I could get on stage, and by the time I was off, I had completed my artistic task, you know. Like it's not as hard as making a movie or or publishing a novel, but it's like it's done, and you write screenplays and they go on the shelf. They're just instructions for an artwork, but like I had this immediate there's applause and laughter and it's magical and very, very intoxicating experience. And I did it once. And I always tell people, get up because the first time is easy. There's so much wild chemicals flying through your body and brain, and you're so excited, you're so ready. And it was amazing. And the second time was the one of the worst bombs ever. And then by the fifth, you kind of get better again, and then you just spend the next decade figuring out how to do it.
Oh wow!
And yeah, it's nice.
Do you have a good joke for us?
Oh, I mean, like, it's funny. You were asking about how I moved to Berlin, and it's like that's kind of hard. It's one of those things I can't talk about because I have to say that on stage all the time. So what do I get up and I say, I'm from America. I moved here because of my wife, because of her work. She's a scientist, and in America, that's illegal. So that's sort of how I open, let them know where I'm coming from, and then we talk about how I had to Google what country appreciates rational thought, and that's then get to Germany, and life is good there, as it turns out.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
like that your comedy experience of stand up sounds fun too. And then do you want to share with your podcast, cuz you're with Berlin, the new show radio, how do you say it?
Spätkoff.
Spätkoff.
Yeah. Yeah, so Spätkoffs or Spätis are the sort of corner stores that are part of the personality of Berlin. They're always open. Spät means late, Kauf means buy. So it's sort of like if you're, I don't know, the bodega culture of New York, or even your favorite 7-Eleven or Store 24 or whatever your regional version of that is. So they're like kind of a place, the mailman might drop your packages where you would go to get beer or cigarettes or whatever, or non-alcoholic beverages or non-addictive, candies and snacks. And they're just part of what that city is that never sleeps. So Radio Spätkoff, we take Berlin news and we translate it into English for the people who live there and don't speak or read German. And when we started it a long time ago, it was incredibly difficult to find out what was going on without speaking the language. Now it's easier, but we get to spend more time focusing on context and analysis and interviews, and getting to know the artists and the people who make Berlin an amazing place. I think we're getting some audio bleed from several kids out of bed right now.
Oh, that's okay. This is like reality podcast here. We have kids, we have dogs, we have grandfather clocks chiming. So I asked you about so you also have do you want to talk about Mother Fudgers and then the Daniel Stern podcast show, right? We got to add that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Mother Fudgers is a project I did for a while where I was learning to be a father through basically crowd work. So it was a stand-up show where I talked to the audience about what their experiences were like. Fathers are just kind of like a funny concept. I mean, there's a reason why every sitcom and movie has the same kind of guy there. It's like, what, do we even need these people? Like, I mean, biologically for a couple of seconds, and then it's amazing. I had a series of interview questions, and you ask people about their dads, and you just get funny stories, honest, interesting things. And we would do some stand up, and I would interview the comedian about their dad as well. And but like more importantly, like every single time I did that show, I learned real lessons that I could like apply to being a father, the next day. Or I started, I think, before I even was a dad. So it was like, that humor comes from something that's real, and that reality is something that you can really analyze and find some real lessons in. I remember the first one we had, I mean, the takeaway, the sort of headline of it was like, be there. And I was like, okay, yeah, lesson 1, be there, and let's go from there and see what happens.
Oh, that's nice. And then what about your own, the Daniel Stern podcast?
Yeah. That's the Daniel Stern show was actually not. That was another live show I did, and that was the Daniel Stern show was where I did my weirdest, most experimental stuff on stage. My one of my comedy homes in Berlin is called the Comedy Cafe Berlin. It's sort of a black box theater, very improv focused, and the people who would come to see me there and would enjoy what I did were ready for anything. So I had a show once where I had someone came out and he let the audience know he was a character. Who was he? He was doing oh, what's the redheaded singer rock guy? Oh gosh, it doesn't matter. The point is, he was in character, and he let them know that I had died, and they had gotten a bunch of material, genetic material information to generate a clone, and they just needed to cheer and clap, and like that would give the energy for the clone to come back to life. Now, as they had come in, there was a blue rain barrel on the stage, which everyone kind of ignored. They knew it would be a prop for whatever later. What was actually going on is from before the audience had opened to when this opening video played, when he introduced the concept, I had been submerged in water, breathing through a tube on the stage. So, and to not break the bit, I did swallow, get a little water in my lungs. But after I could hear the cheering, I jumped out of the barrel, mostly naked, and started screaming, "What am I? Where am I? What's going on?" And that's the kind of like comedy I was doing on this Daniel Dern show was, you know, um, just getting as weird as possible. I think on that same show, I had someone shaving my back while doing an impersonation of Scorsese, and it was just sort of it would get real weird.
Avant-garde, fun. It sounds like a good time. It's like, yeah, because I had like Daniel Blutman on, and he had this. He actually said he was beating up people in the audience with this like invention, like this comedy superhero guy, and then I guess like they weren't allowed to do that anymore with the audience. But yeah, like so you comics are like very energetic and having these great skits. So it's fun for the audience because that's what they go to see something exciting. And whether you're a good
Yeah,
talker comedian or if it's physical, but yeah. So I'm sorry, I actually probably said it wrong, but it's Daniel Dern show. Sorry about that.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. So that it was Daniel Dern show is just my chance to totally do whatever the weirdest, dumbest thing. Because a lot of times I get on stage, it's me and a mic, and I'm doing stand up, and I'm a guy talking and saying what I think is funny, like a lot of other guys. So that was my chance to just be like, I need to get some stuff out of here, and yeah, get
Yeah.
weird and wacky.
Yeah, so where can they keep up with you? Like, when's your podcast Berlin Festival? When's the next
Right. So, yep, the PodFest Berlin is July 16th and 17th, and that'll be that 2 days of just tons and tons of podcast stuff. If you're in Berlin, come on over. If you're not, come on over. I mean, it's fine. It's a fun city to visit, especially in the summer. My podcast, and you'll find all that at podfestberlin.com. You can learn about me at sterndaniel.com. My instas and all of those things you can find there. And it's yeah, that's it. What am I? Daniel and Stern on most things is where you'll find me.
And then in the summary, I'll have all your links on your website for our audience. And we have an amazing audience, and so I know they're going to go check out your links and social media and your comedy. So and anything that you want them to check out, like which podcast do you want them to go over and listen to?
Yeah, if you're curious about Berlin news, check out Radio Spakoff. It's I'm very proud of what we do there, and in particular, we have an evergreen sort of short series we did called "How to Fuck Up an Airport." It's F hashtags, but How to Fuck Up an Airport. It's about the debacle of building BER Airport, which is it's just this is one of those things where reality does all the comedy for you.
Oh, amazing. And then can they go online and watch your Berlin Podcast Festival as well?
Um, right now we're focusing on the in-person thing. You'll be able to hear all of the podcasts we record there. We'll be recording somewhere between around 50 different podcasts we'll record live. You'll be able to hear those on all of their various streams. But our focus is like getting people actually physically together. So I'm trying to avoid streaming and Zoom because I think we're all a little burnt out on that at this point. 2 years into a pandemic
Yeah. Well,
or three.
yeah. I want to thank
Don't even know.
Daniel. You got Daniel Stern, and check out PodFest Berlin. And thank you for coming on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much. This is delightful.